As we're driving 6 hours on these bumpy roads, mind you, this little boy wearing all white comes running up beside the car, and then he runs up ahead. Now, I don't know where he's going, and all of a sudden, next thing I know, there are 10, 20, 30, 100, 200, hundreds of people surrounding the car. I don't even know how to be with all this. I get out of the car, everyone's singing. And then all of a sudden, everyone parts. And all the women of the village come forward wearing the same green dress that I had been given that morning. And they're singing. They're singing in Mende, my family's language. Pada-tang, tang, tang. Pada-tang, tang, tang. Pada-do-a-do-way. Buddha Sarah go to. They're singing, we're preparing for Sarah. I'm literally pinching myself. I've never met anybody there. I didn't win the basketball game. I wasn't the homecoming queen. I just showed up. And that was enough. Another thing I've learned on this journey, sometimes when we just show up, that's enough. So I got to meet my uncle. He says, our daughter has come home. She can be chief someday. She's a princess. Now, there's one thing to hear that on the phone. It's a whole other thing to hear that in front of hundreds of people, because being a chief is not like a presidency. It's not a term. Being a chief is you are chief until you die. So you can be chief your whole life. So it was pretty special. I got to meet my sister Jenaba, my brother Hindobe, all of these family members. I also got to see what happened after an 11-year civil war in West Africa. I thought, oh, I'm just coming to meet my family. This is going to be great. But this journey actually gave me my purpose in life, seeing what happened after this 1991 to 2002 civil war in Sierra Leone.
We are just kilometers away from my father's village of Boompe, and my emotions are all over the place as I anticipate reaching my family's village. Little did I know my green African dress, a cherished gift from my father, would play such a big role in my arrival, my homecoming. A celebration of traditional dance and song went on into the night. Speeches were made by the chief and elders of the tribe stating that I could be their chief someday. It was amazing, overwhelming really.
So I was getting to meet this amazing family, seeing what happened after this an 11-year civil war, and this whole new world opened up. And one of the things that this quote from Brené Brown really resonates with me, vulnerability is not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up when you can't control the outcome. So I think about that inside of all workspaces. I think about that inside of going to meet my family. So as I was in Sierra Leone, I started to learn what happened after this war. I started to learn about what my family had gone through while I was living in America. And I could have sat there and I first started to feel really guilty. Well, I had this great life in America, and they were going through a war, and I started to get really down and somewhat depressed. And then I started to think about it, and I talked to a good friend of mine, and my friend said, listen, being depressed about this and what you had and what maybe they didn't have during a war, that's not gonna make a difference. What are you going to do now? What actions are you going to take, Sarah? And so we started a nonprofit, and we started to rebuild after this war. And we started to do all these wonderful things, and we actually came to the table with my family. So I took my parents who adopted me, Jim and Judy Culberson, to Sierra Leone. So my family from West Virginia to West Africa, West Side, right? I had everybody coming together. It was so amazing. West Virginia to West Africa, and we all got to sit together, and we all came with our assumptions about one another. You know how you come with your assumptions? And my assumptions are right most of the time, right? Aren't your assumptions always right? So I came to the table with my assumptions, and my family did too, but we all came together and started to listen to one another, because I don't really think assumptions are so horrible. I think they can only get in the way when we don't actually question them, right? So we all came together in Sierra Leone, and we started to bring our assumptions to the table, and we also started to listen and learn. One of the most amazing things I've learned on this journey is the power of listening and the importance of being heard. Because when I first went to Sierra Leone, my father said, actually, I said, can I bring something for your students? Because I had been working with kids. I said, could I bring t-shirts? He said, we need desks. We've been through a war, and most of the kids in our classrooms are sitting on the floor. I said, okay, I'm sorry. My American mind doesn't really know this. And that's what I had to learn. This was a whole new culture that I was walking into. I didn't know everyone's experience, so I really had to sit there and listen. And the other thing I had to do is having compassion. It's not always easy to have compassion for something that we don't understand at all. I had no idea what it was like to walk in my family's shoes in Sierra Leone. But that's another thing I learned along this journey, the power of bringing our assumptions to the table, really listening to one another, and having compassion, which shows up in every area of life. If we do this in our workspace, with our colleagues, with our families, it's incredible what starts to show up. The other thing I learned is actually recreating and reiterating back to someone what they said. Do you know sometimes how we talk to just say something next and not really listen? The other thing I learned is when we sat down, we didn't just sit down with the leaders of the community, because my family runs the community. So if we just all sat down together, we would get the same results. Well, this is what we need to do, blah, blah, blah. But the moment we sat down with the women, with the children, with the kids in the community, with the amputees in the community who had lost their arms and legs, when we sat down with everyone and had these diverse voices at the table, all of a sudden we started to learn what was needed in the community. We started to learn, this elderly woman said, Sarah, can I have the rest of your water? I had a water bottle this big with this much water left. Now, we had dug 9 wells that had served 12,000 people with clean drinking water with the Rotary Foundation, but that wasn't enough. And we only knew that because we listened to the community. The other thing that was hard in the journey, but we got uncomfortable. What I've learned, when we want to make anything happen and change happen, it is uncomfortable, right? It isn't always easy to do. But we actually were okay. We had to learn to be okay being uncomfortable in a whole new world, because that's when things really shift and change. And we also didn't stop having the conversation, even if there was something we didn't understand. The girls said, we drop out of school because we don't have access to sanitary pads, so we stay at home. Well, the girls and the women are the ones raising the family. So when we listened to the girls, we said, we need to make sure the girls stay in school. So what we learned is the only way that we could actually make change together was to really listen to one another and make sure different diverse voices were at the table and make sure everyone was heard. Now, we still have to make a decision and figure out what's next, but the power of listening and hearing everyone is so powerful. But one of the things that I've learned on this journey is that we have to kind of learn who we are to even go through and have these different conversations. We have to educate ourselves. I had to educate myself on a whole new culture that was completely new to me. And then I was like, do we have to have all these tough conversations? Can we just do what we want to do? It doesn't work that way, right? Even in business, we have to kind of have the tough conversations and listen to each other so we can move everything forward.